Hello, I'm Colin McKay for the Music and History channel, and I got a fun story for you today. Yes, it's about Van Morrison, Van the Man, and as the title says, it's Van the Man kicking ass. What? I know, you might be thinking, another disgruntled Van Morrison story, another story about Van being a grouch, another story about Van Morrison and his COVID songs or anything like that. But no, even though I actually know some people who've even worked with Van and confirm he is in fact a grouch. But that's not what I'm here to tell you about today. No, I'm here to tell you a story about Van Morrison where he kicked some ass. And that story is revealed here in this wonderful book. Ted Templeman, famous music producer, his life in music. And he produced, his first album that he produced was Tupelo Honey for Van Morrison. Who's Ted Templeman, you say? That's right. Well, he famously brought the Doobie Brothers to Warner Brothers Records and produced all of their records. And also, maybe even more famously, I don't know, Van Halen. That's right. He was the man that produced the classic Van Halen records and brought Eddie Van Halen to the world. Yeah. So anyway, flashback to 1971, San Francisco. Ted Templeman is going to produce Van Morrison's Tupelo Honey record, and he's very excited, and Ted's a thorough man. He's getting used to, Van's particular ways. And they're recording in several different studios in San Francisco. And one night, one of them happens to be at a place called Funky Jack's, right there in Haight-Ashbury, which, at the time isn't really one of the safest, nicest neighborhoods. But anyway, they drive to the studio, but they got to park a few blocks away. It's like midnight. And they park the car, and it's just Ted and Van walking down the street. And they're both short guys and just talking about the saxophone solo that Van wants to lay down, And there's a couple of street guys hanging out, and they see these two and start, kind of throwing out a couple of taunts, little threats. What are you doing walking around here? You boys look out of place. You lost. That kind of thing. And Ted's getting very nervous. He's a Southern California beach boy. He's not used to this kind of behavior. And then the next thing he knows is one of these guys steps out in front of him and Van, for a confrontation. And he's just like, oh, man, what are we going to do? And next thing he knows, Van just pivots, turns to the guy, and takes his two fists and just pummels him into the guy's chest and just pushes him up against this wall as hard as he can. And the other guy's just like, what the hell? Obviously wasn't expecting this, and neither's Ted. He's like, what the hell? The only one who's not like, what the hell, is Van. And this just broke the energy, and Ted's realizing, I guess Van Morrison grew up in East Belfast, confrontational neighborhood. This is nothing to him, maybe. Is this other guy going to pull out a gun and shoot him? What are we doing here? But Van doing this, breaks the energy, the prey becomes the predator, and that's just what happened. And the two guys just scurry off and leave without saying a word. And Ted's just sitting there, his mouth is agape. And then Van just starts walking as if nothing happened, doesn't even mention it, just immediately starts back up with, so this saxophone solo I want to lay down, Ted. And Ted's like, what? Okay. And it's just another fun, interesting night with Van Morrison. Yeah, Van the Man kicking some ass. So that's a different story from Ted Templeman, via Ted Templeman and his book about Van Morrison. I thought that would be a good one to know. Why not? And if anyone has any ideas for stories to me to tell, hey, let me know in the comments. And just to let you know, I give music lessons, colinmckay.net/lessons, and I got my own music, Mystic Twang. Pretty sure there's some Van Morrison vibes coming out of it here and there. So I hope you enjoyed the story here on the Music and History channel. Thank you.